having that courage to really listen to yourself, that's the first step, to really understand who you are, what do you value, what do you want. Someone has to be ruthless in order to succeed in business.
Neri, when you researched and wrote your book, Pioneers, you focus on successful immigrant entrepreneurs and how they build a business for longevity and for greater impact. What were some of the surprises that you had when writing this book?
Gosh, many surprises. I think even when I was doing my interviews, I was surprised by what business longevity and what success even meant. Because we often think of business longevity as having a company that will last for centuries and centuries, but I have come to understand that's not really the case. No company lasts forever. Yeah, the oldest companies today are in Japan, but even the oldest company, even that didn't last. It's just not, at some point there is an end to these companies, but then what success really is, what impact really is, what longevity really is, and in the end the answer to that was, it's not so much of how much money you take, and of course this is a business, I'm talking about entrepreneurship, you have to make money, you have to be profitable, but I've come to understand, and what surprised me is that people who have built successful, impactful businesses of longevity did not put profitability as their goal. It wasn't what drove them. They were driven by impact, by creating value, by doing good, by creating a product or service that will truly be of help for people. And almost like the irony here is that they end up making money and they end up having a business of longevity, but profit is not what drives them. They care very much about the nature, the supply chain, the people they employ. Everyone who comes in touch with their company matters to them. So I would say that was like one of the most obvious and biggest surprise that I found. And during my interviews, I also noticed how many of the people I interviewed kept mentioning the word luck. I was lucky I met my wife. I was lucky I moved to New York. I was lucky I met so and so. I was lucky I met my business partner. So I thought, why I need to look into this more. Almost like my interviews led me to this journey. It was like one crumb after the other, and understanding the importance of luck and how luck plays. But luck is not how we think of it. It's not this happy event or unexpected event that happens to you, but it's something that you generate yourself. You put yourself in the right conditions, you take a chance, you make a bold move, you go after the opportunity. So it's a very much a strategic choice that the entrepreneur makes. So that's like another reframing and redefinition of what luck really is in business, and how we can make ourselves luckier, and we need to be able to take advantage of that luck. And I talk about that in the book as well.
Yes, I love the way you formulate it when you say that serendipity, which is another nice word for luck. I always love the word serendipity. How serendipity is when determination meets opportunity. So opportunity is the sort of lucky element, or what we tend to think of as luck. But then determination is your ability to grab that opportunity. And this is what you have noticed then with the successful immigrant entrepreneurs you've interviewed. I mean, you interviewed people that have founded, the founders of Duolingo, for instance, and PayPal, and there's people who
Yes,
launched the Zumba movement. I mean, a lot of highly, highly successful, even billionaires. And this is one of the elements that has come across, then, that ability to grab those opportunities.
absolutely.
And when it comes to then this serendipity and this luck, how can we train ourselves to spot the opportunities that come our way and to be more bold and daring when it comes to grabbing these opportunities?
I think you need to follow. I mean, this is going to sound almost, like too romantic maybe, but you need to follow your interest, your heart, your joy. I think often, again, we talked about success. We think I need to go to a certain school, I need to follow a certain trajectory, or I need to be at a certain company. But often, is that really true to you? Is that really what you want? And I talk about in the book about creating your vision and how important that is, having a very clear vision and values, your values. Authenticity is another theme that I really explored in the book. You probably noticed I used it quite often because, again, it came through my interviews where you have to do what is true for you. And I think that's when almost like lucky events, I don't want to say find you, but they do find you, like because you are truly following your interest, your passion, and you are very true to your values. And when you are on that path, the right people find you. Whereas, let's say you thought I need to go to Harvard because my parents went there. I don't know, I'm giving that as an example. And I need to study engineering, but what you really wanted to be is an actor. So I think having that courage to really listen to yourself, that's the first step, to really understand who you are, what do you value, what do you want, and then following that path. And it may look like a detour, it may to other people look like failure, but once you get on a path that is right for you, serendipity is there to meet you.
Yes, I've noticed this pattern also in my own
Yeah.
life. And I love the way you speak of alignment. When you're aligned with your core vision, with your core values, then things do sort of happen. And I think it's a mix of us being more open to it because it aligns with our own interest, and maybe, some sort of luck element around it. But it's true that these things really happen when there is alignment. When we lack alignment, then the more doors seem to be shut. I think it's because the energy behind it is so forceful
Yes.
when things are not aligned, and people can maybe feel that. Whereas when you're really interested and passionate, like in your case, Neri, when you were interviewing these immigrant entrepreneurs, because you also had an immigrant background and you were clearly very passionate also about business longevity, that spoke to them. So I'm sure a lot more people were willing to share their story with you because they could tell that you were speaking from the heart and this was something that was really meaningful and important for you.
That's a very good point, and I'll tell you how this works. Most recent example is writing the book, because pioneers, 8 principles of business longevity from immigrant entrepreneurs, actually the journey to it took 2 years of rejection, but not necessarily for pioneers itself. In 2022, I decided, okay, I'm going to write a book on resilience. And I've written this very long, and in fact, I was invited by a book agent, by a literary agent, to submit the proposal. It's a very long story, but it wasn't I'm writing about resilience, but that's not really who I am. And who I really am is an immigrant entrepreneur. And my husband actually told me, why are you trying to write about resilience? And I know you've written 5, 6 articles, they got published, but who you are is an immigrant entrepreneur. And it's almost like you will be surprised. I didn't want to open that page of being an immigrant entrepreneur because there's a lot of painful memories of being an immigrant, of being a refugee. And also, given the rhetoric today, I think the second we hear immigrant, there is an immediate, not for everyone, but unfortunately today there is some backlash or negativity. So I thought, I don't know if that's a sexy topic, but it's a topic that is mine, and it's the most authentic topic that I know how to research and write. So it's of no surprise that I had I mean, imagine 2 years of rejection, and almost my original proposal was close to 70, 80 pages. And this one was only 5 pages. And I got a book deal because it was truly something very authentic to me. And as I said, serendipity finds you. I saw that, the acquisition editor of Wiley looked at my LinkedIn profile, and I sent him a message and said, I actually have an idea. I would like to tell you about it. And he said, sure. We had a Zoom call that evening. The rest is history. Of course, then I have to write the proposal, and there's a process to it, but it wasn't 2 years of rejection.
That's exactly what we were saying about when things are not aligned, there's a forceful element to it, and it creates a blockage. And as soon as sort of the stars aligned and it's super authentic to you, things flow with greater ease. I've experienced this both in my life and in my business, so I know both the feelings, the 2 year rejection type feeling, and the sort of natural flow with that LinkedIn message. You spoke right now about resilience, that first book being originally your original idea on resilience. And it is a topic you talk about in the book, and you refer to Grit by Angela Duckworth, which I love. Fantastic book. And I'm curious, what did you notice on the topic of resilience? Were all immigrant entrepreneurs that you interviewed strongly resilient? That's what it seems like. But what were some of your findings on this topic?
So that's such a good point. Resilience, when we think of resilience, we think of strength, we think of not giving up, we think of just persevering, and we definitely think of strength. But through resilience, and we think of something that you do by yourself, you are resilient as a person. It's immediate. The definition of it already is like you have to do it. You have to be resilient, and it has to come from the person. But again, what I've seen is the opposite. Resilience often looks like saying, I can't carry this. This is too much. It looks like, and it sounds like, I need help. And what I've seen, immigrant entrepreneurs, if we are talking about that topic now, they are only able to continue and be resilient because of other people, because of their community. And I think this is a very important aspect of resilience. You cannot be resilient by yourself. You need other people. And that's the irony and the paradox of resilience. And I think I've explored this in different articles. They got published in Fast Company. And in the book, I talk about it in the context of, community especially.
Yes, this is something that I've also noticed with resilience. It's a web that we build, and the stronger the support network we have, the easier it is to take on greater challenges, because we're supported maybe emotionally in our private life, and maybe from a more technical or strategic perspective in our professional life. That's why, as a coach, and I know you do a lot of mentoring and coaching and this too, that also helps a lot, working closely with the coach, with the mentor, with the guide, because it helps you to build that resilience, because it is a web.
Absolutely.
One of the concepts you talk about is this idea of homophilic ties, which I'd never heard of before, like birds of a feather flock together. I'd love you to expand a bit more on this concept.
Homophilic ties is people who are like you, and they don't have to come from the same country, from the same culture as you, but you by working, and it's connected to community again, by working together, by finding people who share the same values as you, who share the same vision as you, you are able to create a much stronger, and in some cases, in the case of immigrant entrepreneurs, they were able to create businesses because they create these homophilic ties, close bond ties, and they will often be very strategic about it. These ties are not just given. They are not just created simply because you and I, let's say, come from the same culture, or we have the same shared values. Doesn't mean we are going to bond immediately. you have to use strategic storytelling. You have to nurture these ties. You have to, in the context of a company, go on vacations together, have lunch together. Duolingo, very recently, the founder of Duolingo, he's from Guatemala. Um, he shared on LinkedIn that every one thing that when he started Duolingo, one thing that he did is to sit down and have lunch with all of his employees. They were 5 at the time. Now they are, of course, hundreds, but he still does that. And he makes sure to have lunch. And in our own company as well, we always sit down for lunch. We have catering in the company. We are 175 people employed in our own factory. Every single day, there is a sit-down lunch and an afternoon tea, which, our factory is based in Turkey, so Turkish tea culture is very important. But this type of creating these ties, as I said, you need to nurture them. And the stronger ties and bonds you have, the more successful your business is.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for the importance of connection, especially nowadays. It's a lot more challenging with a lot of people working remotely. It has become a lot harder for people to have these connections within company. I learned the meaning of company through reading your book, Companies Share Bread
Yes,
Together. I thought that was fantastic. That's exactly what we're talking about
exactly.
when we talk about
Very,
connection.
very good point. I forgot to mention that the very meaning of company is to share bread together. Very true.
Exactly. It goes with the lunch
Yes.
and with the tea. Out of all the 8 principles, which were some that you were already sort of familiar just from your own journey? Which were some of the principles that you have yourself lived as an immigrant entrepreneur and that resonated most with you?
I would say almost all of them because and I think that's why I wrote the book, because I'm listening to the interviews, coding them. Um, I think I have had a very strong vision when we became immigrants. When I became a refugee, I had a very strong vision as to how I wanted my life to look like. And then when we started our own company as well, homophilic ties, we worked with people who were like us, who came from an immigrant background, people we employ in our company are refugees, have an immigrant background. They are not necessarily people who will find employment easily in Turkey. And I think when you have been discriminated against, or when you know how life can be challenging, you tend to create a company that is focused on equality and giving opportunities to other people. Now, reframing is something, and in the principles, I also give an example of my own self, of my own company. In reframing, I talk about my very first failure of not getting into the Turkish university, and how that felt like, and what reframing looks like in real life. In luck, I talk about meeting the Turkish manufacturer when we lived in Bulgaria and I was a little child. So that's why I say all of them relate to me, because I was able to, and I hope whoever reads the book, the readers who read the book, it will also resonate with them. They will find themselves in the pages of the book, because I think it's a universal, in my opinion. I'm talking about immigrant entrepreneurs and I use them as an example, but the principles are universal principles.
One of the core principles in the book is refers to what your grandfather called frying in your own
Yes,
oil, which I think of as being scrappy or very resourceful or making the most of what you have. This is one principle that I think is mostly optimized even more by immigrant entrepreneurs, because often they have a background that's very tough, maybe financially, and they learn to be extremely resourceful, versus maybe people who already live in that country, have a strong network, maybe grew up more abundant. They may be more used to borrowing money and resources, and that can be advantageous, but it can also block sometimes the innovation and creativity. And so this principle of being resourceful, frying in your own oil, was one of the ones that spoke the most to me. I think this one is absolutely fascinating.
I love that. I'm very surprised and happy to hear it. And many people who read the book, that's because it's quite an original concept to say, fry in your own oil, although it's a Turkish saying. And that makes me very happy.
Because this idea of, often I feel that constraints can feel very frustrating, but if you're able to use the constraint to your advantage, to be more creative, to be more innovative, a question I often ask myself is, okay, with what I have, time-wise, money-wise, space-wise, what's the most I can do? What's the best outcome? Because sometimes, I'll give you a very simple example. So with the podcast, I also do solo shows. So I have the YouTube, and so I have like one camera. And so instead of thinking, oh, I wish I had a whole studio with 5 different cameras and 10 video editors, I just think, okay, what's the very best I can do with that one camera and a microphone? How can I optimize the space? How can I optimize the content? And it's really thinking, instead of thinking, what's all the other stuff that I would like more of, which I think is often a default way of thinking when we have high standards. It's pivoting it to what's the most you can do with what you already have, which also leans in a bit to gratitude. I don't know what your thoughts are around this.
I think another thing I will say with frying your own oil, when you start to think, how can I optimize what I have? In business strategy, we talk about sustainable competitive advantage. I think, even though Michael Porter didn't talk about frying in your own oil, this is very much related to strategy as well, because it allows you to really understand and utilize your resources and capabilities in the most optimal way. And yes, gratitude, I think it's very important, but I think not gratitude in a sense that is almost negative, almost like toxic. I think at some point also, as a business owner, you have to say, where do I need help? What external help do I need? How can I get it? And, with frying in your own oil, I would say one thing I want to emphasize is that it doesn't mean you are going to be the sole owner doing everything by yourself without relying on outside investment or external forces. You still need them. But first, you need to look within yourself and really understand, what is it that you do differently? What is it that you do yourself that nobody else can take away from you? What is the unique thing about you? And I think the challenge that I've seen with startups and students, especially I advise startup companies, they start to think immediately about outside investment. And sometimes getting that outside investment can really hurt your company. And unfortunately, I've seen that many companies with great ideas, if they go out to get investment too early, the company can actually die too quickly. So you don't have to become the biggest company immediately. That's another thing about, you can grow slowly. And now you are talking about having one camera. Maybe one day you will have, and soon have 10 cameras in a giant studio. But this right now is what matters the most. And exactly as you described it.
It's not just gratitude, then it's really optimizing your own strengths, also seeing what are you particularly gifted at or good at, and how can you make the most out
absolutely.
of that. Yes, I think it's too easy to always look for just the extra finances or an extra person. We all need that at different moments for sure, but it's good if we can make it work before. This is the example you give in your book with the
Yes,
Zumba
yes,
founders.
I do. They have a very interesting story. You know, Alessandro, he's from Cuba, and when they start Zumba, they have no financing at all. And I think they put their CD like into cereal boxes, and that's how it takes off. Or even Spanx, you know, Sarah Blakely, she's not an immigrant. I haven't looked into her background, but I don't think she has an immigrant story. But at the same time, it's a very good example of how she fried in her own oil when she was first starting her company. She did many things herself. She did many things out of the box. She will, you know, pretend she's the PR of the company, and did you know, wore the t-shirt Spanx everywhere just to advertise the brand. I think that's a very good example of frying in your own oil as well. And imagine if she received an outside investment very quickly, very early on in the company. Spanx will not be what Spanx is today. I guarantee you. And it's $1 billion company today.
Yes, I also love Sarah Blakely and her work, and I think she has exactly that perfect balance of both listening to her intuition and alignment and guidance, and also being strategic, but also
Yeah,
extremely resourceful and daring. And when I listen to her, I think, oh yeah, you can start with nothing and build up to billions. You don't need to start with
exactly.
a lot to get very big. Hmm. Yes, it's a really good example of being resourceful. Wonderful. So now I'm looking at, all the different people you interviewed. Who
Very good
inspired you the
question.
most and why?
I think every interview had something that I was left in reverence, in awe, and you know, I even at the end of the book I say I hope I was able to do justice to their stories. Every single one of them have this exceptional story, and I try to emphasize that in the book. So I can't really choose one. They are all. It's very hard to choose because truly every single one of them left an impact, left a mark on me.
When you read about them from an external perspective, I'm saying, so when I read about them, it's true that there are things we don't realize, about the founder of Calendly who saw his
Yes,
father, die, and the people having all sorts of background and stories, and we just see the name of the company. We just see Duolingo, PayPal, all of
exactly.
Calendly, and we just see the name of the company, and we don't know necessarily the background of the founder. And when you read that, it really does strike a chord, especially since coming back to the founder of Calendly, he'd had also 3 companies who failed, and that was also a core topic in your book, how to reframe and deal with failure.
Absolutely. And another one is Isaac Larian, the founder of Bratz, MJ Entertainment. He came from Iran with just very little money in his pocket. For days, he looked for work to find a job, uh, walking from morning till evening, just going from gas station to restaurant, trying to find any job that he could find. Andrew Grove, the CEO of Intel, the former CEO of Intel, his story is actually the story I start with, and the story that I knew very early on at the age of 18 when I went to study at University of Miami. Every single person really inspired me in the book, and that's why they are there actually.
Yes, and they all have, really interesting points to come across on top of obviously having an interesting background. It's not just looking at rags to riches
Yes,
stories, because that would be an oversimplification, but it's seeing, okay, what are some of the things that they did? What are some of the ways in which they thought and behaved and acted that enabled them to be successful, and what can we learn from that and replicate?
very true.
Because I think sometimes, and this is something you say at the beginning of your book, that we think the immigrant entrepreneurs are maybe more successful just because they've learned to be resilient and gritty and they've had to adapt to a new culture. But actually, there's a lot more than that. There's that being resourceful, there's the kindness, there's the community building, there's bridging the gap between the cultures. There's a lot of other elements to take into account.
Completely. It's exactly what you said. It will be too oversimplification to say, oh, of course, or even to say, so and so is an immigrant. Of course, he or she is going to be successful. They are very strong, or they know how to remain cool under pressure. I don't know, but that will not be the full story. And in the beginning of our chat as well, as I said to you, you don't have to be an immigrant in order to learn from this, or in order for you to also have the same characteristics and follow the same principles. And in fact, I use immigrants as an example in order to illustrate how they build businesses of longevity. But I think in the end, we are all immigrants, and that's what I stand behind. We are all immigrants.
Yes. And we're all in transition all the time, and everything is changing all the time, and nothing is ever permanent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about your book and looking at all the different principles and the stories that you illustrate, I specifically loved what you focused on mostly towards the end, which is that it was all about kindness and community. And as our podcast is coming to a close, I'd love you to share your thoughts on why it's so fundamental to prioritize kindness within business.
So again, it's not something that necessarily that is talked about when we think of business longevity, successful business, successful entrepreneurs like the founder of Moderna, Chobani, Duolingo, Calendly. We think, someone has to be ruthless in order to succeed in business. But again, one of the most surprising elements and conclusion in my book is that kindness is the common element, is the common denominator in all the principles. Without kindness, you cannot practice reframing. Without kindness, you cannot practice community. And that has to be the center. And that's the conclusion in my book as well. And I would say the surprising factor.
It's interesting because I think often we do have this vision of business people being ruthless, and there are famous business CEOs out there and founders who were known to not be particularly kind and who still have very thriving businesses. But then one of the questions that I would ask and challenge is, if you can have a business and you can either be a kind person in the world or you can be a ruthless shark, which one do you actually want to be? If both can actually lead to success, why would you choose a path in which you're mean to other people? I think it's if by being kind you can be as successful, if not, and this is what you're saying, more successful, then why would you ever choose not to be
Katie,
kind?
I end my book with a poem from Mary Oliver. What have you done with... I haven't memorized it, but how are you going to be remembered? At the end of the day, it's not about, did you become a billionaire? It's not about that. It's about the impact you made, the people's hearts you touched. And I think this is what you need to ask yourself. I mean, not you, Katie, but in general, that's what we need to ask ourselves. Because, as I said, no company lasts forever. There is no such thing as an immortal person or an immortal company. But it's about the impact that you make and, how you are going to be remembered at the end.
Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much, Neri. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I highly recommend the book Pioneers to all the people listening and watching this. Really
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.